The midday sun burned the concrete of the courtyard like a hot iron. Ayla adjusted the strap of her backpack, eyes downcast, when three shadows surrounded her. The noise of conversations around her died slowly, as if sensing danger before seeing it. She was young, only 2 days old, dark skin, long braids touching her shoulders, silence like armor. The three boys formed a semicircle. Quiet laughter, elbows touching, glances exchanged. The entire courtyard became a ticketless audience. The provocation began as it always does, with words disguised as jokes. Then came the shove, light, almost accidental. Ayla took a step back, took a deep breath. She tried to sidestep, but the knee came before any words could come out. The sound was dry, dull, violent. She fell to her knees. Blood appeared at the corner of her mouth, bright red against her dark skin. The punches came in succession, fast, cowardly, precise. The bullies' laughter cut through the air like broken glass. No one moved. 50 students, maybe more, frozen like pillars of salt. Some filmed. Others just watched. But none of them approached. Ayla didn't scream. She didn't beg. She raised her hand to shield her face, but her eyes remained open, steady, defiant, alive, as if saying without words, "I see you. I remember every face here." The silence weighed more heavily than the heat, more than the violence, more than the collective shame no one wanted to name. She thought of her mother, of the voice that always said, "Never forget where you come from." She took a deep breath. The air burned, but she didn't let the pain overcome her posture. Not here. Not in front of them. One of the boys spat on the ground near her feet. The other two laughed louder, as if celebrating an easy victory. "Welcome to school, princess." The voice was thin, full of cheap venom. Ayla wiped the blood away with the back of her hand. Slowly, unhurriedly, without fear. The gesture was so controlled it seemed rehearsed, but it wasn't acting. It was survival. It was inheritance. This is all she learned before she even learned to read. Then it happened. On the second floor, behind a tinted glass window, a man stopped walking. He held a brown briefcase, his badge hanging around his neck. The school principal. But at that moment, he wasn't the principal. He was just a father watching his daughter bleed in the courtyard. His face didn't move. He didn't scream. He didn't run. But something shifted in the air. The power, until then in the hands of bullies, began to slip like sand through fingers. No one noticed. But the change had already begun, and the look that appeared in that window carried the weight of a sentence yet to be pronounced. Ayla didn't fall again. She remained on her knees for 3 seconds, maybe 4, long enough for the entire courtyard to understand she wouldn't ask for help. She wouldn't beg. She wouldn't break. She placed her hands on the hot cement, felt the rough texture against her palms, and rose. Slowly. Each movement seemed to weigh a ton, but none of them showed weakness. Blood still trickled down, forming a thin line from the corner of her mouth to her chin. She didn't wipe it away this time. She left it there, exposed, as proof of what they had done. The three bullies took a half step back, unconsciously, like someone who realizes something has gotten out of control, but can't quite put their finger on it. Ayla stared at them, one by one, unhurriedly, eye to eye. There was no hatred in that look, no exploding rage. There was something worse. It was recorded. Memory. The silent certainty that this moment would be remembered for a long time. The boy who had kneed her looked away first, then the second. The third pretended to laugh, but the sound came out weak, artificial, empty. A tear fell, a single one, a solitary one. But it wasn't a tear of pain. It was distilled fury, condensed into water and salt. Ayla took a deep breath, filling her lungs with hot air and dust. She adjusted her backpack on her shoulders. The gesture was slow, deliberate, almost ritualistic, like someone donning invisible armor before entering battle. The crowd around her began to disperse, nervous, restless. Some looked around, searching for a quick exit. Others lowered their phones, turned off their cameras, and deleted the videos they hadn't yet posted. The shame began to weigh heavily. She took the first step, then the second. No stumble, no hesitation. She walked like someone who knows her own size and doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. The corridors opened naturally. Students parted, creating an involuntary path. No one spoke. No one dared. The silence was now hers, not theirs. Ayla passed between the tables, between the groups, between the gazes that couldn't bear the weight of what they had witnessed. "Sorry," someone murmured. She didn't answer, not because she despised the request, but because that word, there, in that moment, was too small to repair the damage. On the second floor, the principal still stood at the window. He watched his daughter walk. He saw her dignity intact despite the blood, and something in him broke, not from weakness, but from fierce pride mixed with paternal grief. He descended the stairs, badge dangling on his chest, briefcase still in hand. His footsteps echoed in the empty hallway, steady, measured, controlled. Because he knew that what came next couldn't be driven by emotion, it would have to be driven by justice. The entire school became a rumor mill. Hallways became informal courtrooms. Bathrooms became courtrooms. Cafeterias became makeshift newsrooms for fake news. The video was already circulating, 3 different versions, each edited to suit a convenient narrative. Some cut the beginning, others sped up the ending, but everyone shared it. "She provoked it," said a girl with blonde braids, leaning against her locker. "It was too harsh," replied another, lowering her voice as if confessing to a crime. "But did you see the way she looked at them?" The debate wasn't about justice. It was about comfort, about finding a version that would let everyone sleep peacefully. The teachers knew. Of course they knew. They walked through the hallways with hurried steps, eyes glued to the ground like someone crossing a minefield. No one wanted to get involved. Getting involved meant taking sides, and taking sides meant risk, of prosecution, of dismissal, of social discomfort. So they pretended not to hear. They pretended not to see. A history teacher stopped at the door to the teacher's lounge, glanced at her cell phone where the video was playing, and looked away. She turned off the screen, put the phone away. She poured coffee, as if nothing had happened, as if blood in the playground was just another normal day of school. Ayla walked under sharp gazes. Every step was watched, dissected, judged. Whispers died as she passed, but were reborn as soon as she turned her back. "Poor thing," someone said, but the tone wasn't empathetic. It was pity, and pity is a distant cousin of compassion. It carries superiority, not solidarity. She felt the weight, not of the injuries, but of the isolation, of being turned into a spectacle, of having her pain go viral, commented on, liked, shared. She became a trending topic without choosing to appear. She became a meme without authorizing the joke. Have you ever seen something like this and remained silent? Comment. The video showed more than they told. In the full, unedited versions, you could see her hesitation, her attempt to leave, the initial push, the group's cowardice. But these versions weren't the most widely shared. People prefer narratives that justify their own inaction. So the cuts continued, and the truth grew ever more distant, until someone, no one knows who, left an anonymous note on the principal's desk. Paper folded in 4, shaky handwriting, blue ink. "Mr. Principal, did you see what they did to your daughter?" The principal read it, reread it, folded the paper again, put it in his pocket, took a deep breath. He looked out the window, the courtyard now empty, dark stains on the cement where blood had fallen. He knew the whole world was watching. He knew any movement would be amplified, distorted, judged. But he also knew that silence was no longer an option. Because when a whisper becomes a scream, someone must have the courage to name the truth. The room was dim. The curtains were drawn, the lights were low, and the silence seemed solid. Ayla sat on the edge of the bed, her backpack thrown on the floor, her uniform still stained with dust and dried blood. She looked at the desk. There, framed in dark wood, was the photograph. Her mother, 20 years younger, standing in front of a school. Not this one, but another, equally hostile one. A teacher. Black. Alone. The smile in the photo was firm, but the eyes held something Ayla now understood perfectly. The weariness of someone who must prove their worth every day. She picked up the frame. She ran her fingers over the glass, feeling its cool texture. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Not as a vague memory, but as an internal recording, clear and present. Never lower your head, Ayla. They don't know where you come from. They don't know what you carry in your heart. The phrase had been spoken 3 years earlier, in the kitchen at home, after another incident, another school, another act of violence. Always the same story retold with different characters. But her mother was no longer here to repeat those words. She had left 2 years ago, taken by a cancer that didn't wait for permission. Ayla remembered the day her mother gave her the necklace. Old gold, worn by time, with a small pendant shaped like a sankofa, the African bird that looks back as it walks forward. This belonged to your grandmother and her grandmother. Never forget, your strength didn't begin with you. The necklace was there, in the drawer of her nightstand. She opened it slowly, as if handling something sacred. She picked up the chain, felt its familiar weight in her palm. The metal was cold, but quickly warmed against her skin. She put on the necklace. She fastened the clasp behind her neck. The sankofa rested exactly where it always did, in the center of her chest, over her heart. Ayla looked in the mirror. Her face was swollen, the cut on her lip, the bruise beginning to form around her eye. But the necklace shone, and somehow that was enough. "I will not bow my head," she said aloud, to herself, to her mother who no longer listened, to all the grandmothers who came before and forged paths with their own hands. The pain became something else. It didn't disappear, but it transformed. It became fuel. It became an anchor. It became a root. Downstairs, the front door opened. Firm footsteps in the hallway. Her father removed his jacket, unclipped his badge, and set his briefcase on the entryway table. He walked slowly upstairs. He stopped at his daughter's bedroom door. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He just stood there, watching. Ayla turned her head. Their eyes met, and in that silence, everything was said. He knew. She knew he knew. And now, finally, something was going to happen. The office smelled of cold coffee and old paper. The walls were covered with diplomas, certificates, photos of past graduations, smiling faces that never had to bleed in the courtyard. The principal sat in the worn leather chair, turned on the computer, and opened the security camera footage. 4 different angles. All showed the same truth. 3 against 1. Knee strikes, punches, laughter, complicit silence. He watched it once, then again. The third time, he clenched his fist so hard his knuckles creaked. He paused the video just as blood appeared on his daughter's face. He took a deep breath. Once, twice, 3 times. Like someone trying to extinguish an internal fire by blowing slowly. But the fire wouldn't go out. He was the principal. He had institutional responsibilities, protocols, hierarchies. The school board demanded neutrality. "We can't appear biased," they'd said at the last meeting. "Credibility depends on fairness." Pretty words, empty. Easy to say when it's not his daughter on the floor. He glanced at the drawer where he kept the school's bylaws, 60 pages of rules that, at that moment, seemed irrelevant in the face of such a simple truth. Someone hurt his daughter. The tension was rising like water boiling in a covered pot. He knew every move would be watched, judged, questioned. If he acted as a father, he would be accused of abuse of power. If he didn't, he would be complicit. The line between justice and revenge had never seemed so thin. He closed his eyes. He saw his wife's face, Ayla's mother, the woman who instilled dignity in every word, every gesture. "Do the right thing, not the easy thing," she said, always, like a mantra, like a moral compass that never failed. He opened his eyes. He looked at her photo on the table, and something inside him shifted. He picked up the phone, dialed 3 numbers. Secretary, call the 3 students involved in the playground incident. "And their parents, too?" His voice was firm, but not raised, controlled, surgical. Extraordinary meeting. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock in the morning. Attendance mandatory. On the other end of the line, the secretary hesitated. "Mr. Principal, are you sure that—" He interrupted, softly but definitively. "Absolutely sure. Confirm everyone's attendance." He hung up. He took a breath. He felt the weight of the decision settle on his shoulders like a leaden cloak. He looked again at his wife's photo. Her smile seemed approving. It seemed to say, "You know what to do. You always have." He locked the drawer. He turned off the computer. He turned off the office light. He walked down the empty school hallway, now silent, almost ghostly in the dim light. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, neutrality would die, and he was ready to face the consequences. 9 o'clock in the morning. The office seemed smaller with so many people inside. The three tough guys entered first. Broad shoulders, low chuckles, confidence that overflowed like barely contained liquid. They didn't come alone. Behind them, three fathers. Expensive suits, watches that cost entire salaries. The posture of someone who never had to apologize for anything. One of them carried a genuine leather briefcase. Another already had his cell phone in his hand, dialing someone important. Lawyers. Probably. Always lawyers. The third just smiled, that smile that says nothing will happen because it never does. The principal sat behind his desk. His hands were folded. His face was neutral. He didn't stand to greet them. He simply nodded, indicating the empty chairs. The boys sat relaxed, legs spread, arms loosely spread, as if watching a boring but fleeting formality. The parents stood, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, ready to defend, ready to attack, ready to turn victims into culprits and the guilty into innocents, as they always did. "Let's settle this quickly, Principal. My son has practice at 10. One of the parents said. The tone was firm, almost an order. The principal listened in silence. He let the discomfort grow. He let the silence weigh him down. Then he slowly stood up, grabbed the remote, and turned on the projector on the wall. The image appeared large, clear, undeniable. The courtyard, the sun, Isla surrounded, the knee, the punches, the blood, the laughter, everything. No cuts, no editing, no convenient narrative, just the raw truth, exposed in high definition. The sound of the impact echoed in the office, dry, violent, real. The three boys stopped laughing, their legs closed, their shoulders hunched. Their parents looked at each other, uncomfortable. The lawyer put away his cell phone. The video continued to play. 30 seconds, that seemed like an eternity. When it ended, the director paused the image precisely on Ayla's face. Blood at the corner of her mouth, eyes open, firm, accusing. He turned to the boys. He looked each one in the eye. He took his time. He let his weight fall. Then he said, his voice low but clear as a blade, "This girl is my daughter." The air left the office, literally, as if someone had opened a door to a vacuum. The three boys froze. One of them opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The parents took a half step back. The lawyer swallowed hard. The silence that fell was no longer discomfort. It was fear, pure, raw, inevitable, because now everything was changing. Now it wasn't just an incident. It was personal. It was a father. It was justice with a face and a name. The principal didn't need to shout. He didn't need to threaten. He simply let the truth do the work. And the truth, in that moment, weighed more heavily than any speech. He turned off the projector. The room returned to darkness, and everyone understood. The storm was just beginning. The principal took 3 steps forward. He stopped in front of the boys. He looked the first one in the eye. He lingered there, letting the silence cut through. Then the second, then the third. None of them could hold his gaze. They looked away. They lowered their heads. They shrank, as if finally understanding that impunity has an expiration date. "Do you have anything to say?" The question wasn't an invitation. It was a sentence. The tone was calm, but it carried the weight of a hammer striking wood. One of the boys opened his mouth. He stammered, We didn't. The words died before they could make sense. There was no defense. There was no justification. Just the naked truth, exposed, bleeding onto the wall through the switched-off projector. The principal turned to the parents. Tomorrow, the entire school will be called to the auditorium. Every student, every teacher, this video will be shown. And you three, he pointed to the boys, will explain what you did. Not to me, to everyone. The father of the boy who had kneed him stepped forward. You can't expose my son like that. He's a minor. He has rights. The principal didn't look away. And my daughter, didn't she have the right to walk in the playground without being beaten? The man backed away. He had no answer. He never had. Because privilege doesn't teach you to argue. It teaches you to avoid consequences. The next day, the auditorium was packed. Rows of seats were occupied, a low murmur. Cell phones were put away by strict order. The atmosphere was tense, electric, charged with anticipation and fear. Ayla entered through the side door, chest tight, head held high, steps firm. She sat in the front row, alone. The principal took the stage. He adjusted the microphone. The sound echoed too loudly, then adjusted. He looked at the audience, took a deep breath. He began. When you hurt her, you hurt something much bigger. You hurt the idea that this school is safe, that everyone matters here. You've proven that's not the case. The video played, big screen, loud sound, no cuts. Some students looked away. Others covered their mouths. One girl began to cry, not because of Ayla's pain, but because of her own complicity. Because she was there, she saw it, and did nothing. When the video ended, the principal called the three boys to the stage. They ascended slowly, heads bowed, as if ascending a scaffold. Speak. The order was simple. But none of them could. One tried to justify it. He said it was just a joke. The entire auditorium groaned, a collective sound of revulsion. He stopped. He lowered his head. The shame finally set in. The principal didn't need to say anything else. He looked at Ayla. She was serene, not vengeful, not relieved, just present, witness to her own righteousness. He turned to the audience again. Family is what lifts you up, not what pushes you down. The phrase echoed. Absolute silence. And then, for the second time in that school, the auditorium froze. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was awareness. What if it were you in her place? The weight of the question hung in the air, unanswered, but with enough presence to change something. The screen lit up once more. But this time it wasn't the edited, fragmented, secretly shared video. It was the complete recording. Every angle, every camera. 60 seconds of unfiltered truth, no subtitles, no narrative to justify the unjustifiable. The audience watched in deathly silence. There was no turning back. There was no alternative version. The violence was there, exposed in a cold, undeniable light. When the video ended, a mother in the third row covered her face with her hands. She wept, not out of sadness, out of shame, because her son was in the playground that day. He saw it all. He filmed it, and laughed along with it. Tears welled up. Not all of them were genuine empathy. Some were disguised discomfort. Others, belated guilt. But they were there, and that was something. A father stood up, a white man, gray hair, a firm voice. This can't keep happening. Not here, not anywhere. Another father agreed. Then a teacher, then a student. A collective revolt began to take shape. It wasn't a revolution. It was just the bare minimum, acknowledging that something was rotten and needed to be pulled out by the roots. The principal listened. He didn't interrupt. He let the indignation grow, take up space, gain a voice. Then he raised his hand. The auditorium fell silent again. Starting today, this school adopts a zero-tolerance anti-discrimination policy. Any act of racial violence, physical or verbal, will result in immediate suspension and full disciplinary proceedings. There will be no exceptions. There will be no privileges. He paused. He took a breath. He looked at Ayla, and the first voice on the new Student Equity Council will be hers. He pointed. All eyes turned. Ayla stood slowly. She walked onto the stage. Her steps were firm. Her necklace gleamed on her chest. There was no fear, There was no hesitation, just presence. She didn't need to say much. She didn't make a fiery speech. She didn't seek revenge disguised as justice. She simply said, in a clear, firm voice, "I don't want anyone else to bleed in this schoolyard, not because of the color of their skin, not because of anything." She paused. She looked at the three boys, still huddled in the corner of the stage. "Broken. You hurt me, but you didn't break me. And now, I'm going to use this pain to build something better." The auditorium erupted in applause. It wasn't celebration. It was catharsis. It was relief. It was the sound of something finally moving in the right direction. The three boys were suspended. Their parents were fined. Lawsuits were filed. But more importantly, something shifted in the air. The invisible hierarchy that had always existed, who can and who can't, who matters and who doesn't, began to crumble. Not completely, not all at once, but crack by crack, brick by brick. Isla stepped off the stage. The director was waiting for her below. Father and daughter exchanged glances. He touched her shoulder, gently, proudly. "Share this story if you believe in change, because when a knee bends, a truth rises." 3 weeks later, the courtyard was different. Not physically. The cement was still cracked. The concrete tables were still hard. The sun was still scorching at midday. But something had changed in the atmosphere. The complicit silence gave way to a cautious, almost reverent respect. Students walked more carefully. They made more eye contact. They asked permission when they bumped into each other. Small gestures, but gestures that mattered. Ayla walked among them, backpack on her shoulders, braids loose in the wind. Her mother's necklace swung across her chest with each step, old gold reflecting new light, a symbol of inheritance transformed into everyday armor. On the main wall of the courtyard, where before there had been only peeling paint and old graffiti, there was now a mural. Vibrant colors, firm lines, diverse faces. In the center, a phrase in large letters, "Dignity is our uniform." The idea had been hers. The execution, everyone's. Students from all grades participated. White, black, Latino, Asian. Each left their mark. Each brushstroke was a silent promise that this place would no longer be a territory of cowardice. The mural didn't erase the past, but it signaled the future. And sometimes, that's enough. Ayla stopped before the mural. She touched the wall with her fingertips. She felt the texture of the dry paint, still slightly uneven. She thought of her mother. She thought of the grandmothers who came before. She thought of all the black women who bled in courtyards, hallways, living rooms, streets, and still kept walking. Not because they were strong, but because they had no choice, because giving up was never an option when their existence is already resistance. She took a deep breath. The air entered clean, weightless. For the first time in weeks, there was no lump in her throat. There was no fear in her chest, only continuity. The principal watched from afar, leaning against the administration door, arms crossed, gaze serene. He saw his daughter touch the mural. He saw the necklace glow, and he whispered, too low to be heard, but loud enough to be felt. May they learn from what they saw. It wasn't a wish. It was an order. To himself, to the school, to the world. Because justice isn't an event, it's a process. It doesn't end when the villain is punished. It ends when the victim ceases to exist. When dignity becomes the norm, not the exception. Isla turned her face. She looked directly into the imaginary camera that always accompanies those who carry history within them. Her eyes were steady. No anger, no fear, just presence. The Sankofa necklace shone, looking back, walking forward. She smiled, not with relief, not with victory, but with belonging. Because finally, in that courtyard, she wasn't an intruder. She was a foundation. She was a landmark. She was living proof that the ground is ours too, and they always forget that. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more videos like this, and don't forget to like and share, and see you in the next video.